Good morning and welcome again. Every 2 years, ALPA pilot leaders gather at this important event. Steeped in tradition, this meeting is much more than simply adhering to our Constitution and bylaws. What we do at our Board of Directors meeting defines what ALPA will do for the next 2 years and beyond. It's our time to review, to recalibrate, and to move forward. Our industry is not without challenges, and while we need to think about tomorrow, next month, and next year, it's also critical that we never lose sight of how each move we make can impact our profession in the years to come. ALPA's first Board of Directors meeting was held 80 years ago. And over the years, delegates have debated many controversial topics. These delegates also established a financial safety net for our union. And they wrote ALPA's Pilot Unity Resolution, which brought back the Continental, ExpressJet, and FedEx pilot groups. So for just a second, raise your hand if you were born after 1985. I'd like to have my hand up for that, but I can't, so it's audience participation here. In that year, the Board of Directors called a special meeting to recommend the creation of a major contingency fund through a 1% dues increase. Now, do you think that was easy? Special meeting for a dues increase? I don't think so. But ALPA members in this room, have used this fund almost 100 times since it was created, and it's being used right now. This union functions the way it does today as a result of many of these tough decisions. It's important to recognize that the decisions and the plans we create at this meeting will be discussed when we're all long gone. And as the representatives, the duly elected representatives of the most powerful aviation airline union in the world, by your peers, we're responsible for deliberating and focusing our efforts on initiatives that will improve our members' lives. To do that, we need to take a good, hard look at ourselves and ask some questions. What did we commit to do? Have we done it? Did it work? And what must we do now? In today's environment, it's important that we pool our experience and knowledge and share our different perspectives to make decisions that will lead to success. Today I want to give you an overview of our current situation so that we're ready for our agenda work and strategic planning discussions. So I'm going to start with a brief industry update. As a result of major restructuring, the U.S. airline industry has largely recovered from the huge losses of the last decade. In the last few years, most airlines have generated modest profits, especially when you compare them to other industries. However, we still face a number of outside challenges. We have a sluggish economy, we have volatile fuel prices, and we have the highest taxes of any industry, just to name a few. Additionally, certain segments, such as the express industry, continue to be in a state of flux. while some of Canada's northern-based carriers continue to grow, the industry there is experiencing a similar story. Following the global financial crisis, the Canadian segment is now dealing with very high airport rent and security fees, fuel cost volatility, increased unfair, unlevel competition out of foreign countries. Change in external events have always affected the airline industry. And we have all experienced short-term cycles and long-term challenges throughout our careers. Over the last several years, airlines have dealt with the cyclical nature of the industry and the economy. And these are isolated events that have a dramatic impact in the short term, but have not caused long-term fundamental change. Remember that 2002 SARS outbreak? And how about just a couple of years ago, the Icelandic volcano eruption with a name that's almost as long as K-12 back here that I have trouble with? Those are the kind of events that I'm talking about. And while the industry has had to deal with these short-term shocks, there are also secular events, long-term changes that occurred and have profoundly affected our industry. You know, we've seen examples of these changes in the past and know that they force airlines to alter the way they do business. These fundamental changes have been caused by government policy such as the Deregulation Act of 1978, by industry-changing events such as 9/11, by the lasting change to our industry by high fuel prices, and by industry consolidation. So as a recap, we have cyclical changes, which are short-term and temporary. And we have secular changes that are fundamental in nature and change the way we do business. So how do we want our industry and our airlines to deal with both types of changes and events? Since deregulation, we've seen how a cyclical change can break an airline just as easy as a secular change. So moving forward, we need our companies to be financially stable to succeed through the cyclical changes, and expect them to have the ability to successfully deal with the secular events. Over the last few years, mergers have reduced the number of airlines and competition in most segments of the industry. But the jury's still out on whether that's secular change. If so, will consolidation enable the industry to succeed, or at the very least, be profitable throughout the various economic cycles and external shocks? We shall see. But I can tell you this, what doesn't help our industry is the insane number of taxes. The airline industry leads all others in America with 17 external taxes and fees from the federal government. And let me repeat that, 17 taxes. Think about that for just a minute. How can we expect airline companies to succeed and pay their employees a decent, livable wage commensurate with the training, the education, and experience they have if they're unable to turn a profit? What we need is pro-aviation government policy. And using the term government policy is really a stretch. The reality is there's a fundamental lack of government policy. Now, I know a few things but I bet I'm right on this, that no one in our government sat down one day and said, hey, wow, let's impose 17 taxes on the airlines. There was an incremental, insidious process that went unchallenged because of lack of government vision and any voice for aviation. Airlines were weak in Washington, probably directing their energy on us instead of protecting their turf where they needed to be. Many of these airlines continue to be weak today. They became an easy target to raise revenue. And you know exactly how these taxes are impacting us. They cut into the thin margins that an airline company might make, and it makes it harder for us to negotiate. So let's be clear, let's be crystal clear. It's time to fix this and work with our government to rationalize the tax burden, to enhance the viability of air service. How about a tax for pilot retirement? How about a tax to make sure you have a livable wage? How about those? How about them looking at that instead of what they spend all day doing, just imposing random taxes, having the impact that it is? So turning my take on collective bargaining, I'd like to paraphrase Charles Dickens. It was the best of times, and it was the worst of times. We had everything before us, and we had nothing before us. Some of our members have negotiated contracts that get us much closer to the level of pay, benefits, work rules, and job security that you know we deserve. But at the same time, bankruptcy and restructuring negotiations have forced some pilots to give up hard-fought gains, fought for over decades. We know what's driving both scenarios, and we know what we need to do, and we know how to address it. The restructuring and consolidation of the mainline industry that began in 2002 radically altered the landscape. It presented many bargaining obstacles and eventually provided some opportunities. Today, the same forces are dramatically changing the fee-for-departure, supplemental, and cargo airlines. So let me tell you ALPA's tale of two cities. The first is a positive and hopeful world. Contracts at FedEx in 2006 and 2010. Delta in 2008 and 2012. Hawaiian, Alaska, Spirit, Jazz, AirTran in 2009 and 2010 have climbed back up. So let's take a look at these pay charts for 7576 captain rates. It shows favorable gains and benefits across carrier lines. And again, I want to be clear. These gains are not at the level we want, but far enough to see that our profession is worth pursuing. Some pilot groups have taken advantage of these opportunities, but others have not, like the American and U.S. Airways pilots. The dotted line shows when a carrier passed its contract amendable date, and the arrows signified a strong upward movement. And let me mention one of the most important negotiations in our association's history, the United and Continental JCBA. Their collective struggle is an example how, as a profession, we'll never give up, never say die, never yield, always be resolute. United followed by U.S. Airways. United followed U.S. Airways in bankruptcy. which literally destroyed the pilots' pay and benefits. Continental pilots suffered a similar disaster outside of bankruptcy. It's long past time when United and Continental pilots should have recovered from this devastation. When this deal is done, and we're close, we'll have a contract that starts to recognize our contributions at what will be the largest airline in the world. And I am confident that negotiations at Alaska and downstream at Hawaiian, when finished, will confirm and add to this positive pattern. But there's also a less comforting picture, and it's unnerving how quickly the world can change for airline pilots. And it is so bad and so destabilized that I can't even illustrate it on a chart. About a year ago, Eagle pilots were part of a positive picture. Today, along with Ryan and Evergreen pilots, they're fighting for their careers. At North American, its parent company filed for bankruptcy and had to downsize. Now, why? Because North American, along with other military contracting and cargo airlines, faced the same problems that plagued legacy carriers: too much capacity, too little business. In bankruptcy negotiations, pilot leaders at North American, with support of ALPA negotiators, lawyers, financial analysts, and communication specialists, negotiated a tentative agreement under the most difficult circumstances. In it, we minimized concessions and secured equity, profit sharing, and a seat on the global board of directors. Now, it's too early to tell whether the company will reorganize successfully, but it does tell the ALPA story. We never give up, and we always look for opportunities when the going gets tough. Now, there's no better example of the best of times and the worst of times than the recent history of the Pinnacle pilots. 2 years ago, when faced with a merger of 3 airlines, Colgan, Mesaba, and Pinnacle, the pilots decided to bargain one contract, one seniority list, and create one MEC on an extremely expedited schedule. And guess what? They accomplished all of it, following closely to the timeline they envisioned. It was an incredible moment. I believe the most successful merger ever. But now fast forward to right now, and they're facing a new challenge: bankruptcy. And I can tell you, once again, we'll use our resources and we'll look for opportunities to succeed for these members. And when we do that, I believe we'll find a positive outcome. If we think creatively about the way the world is changing, as pilot leaders, we'll capitalize on the opportunities presented. We must learn from these experiences because our industry will continue to have the best and the worst of times. Why? Because change will always affect us in fundamental ways. The most obvious way has been through consolidation. We now have fewer legacy and express carriers in our country. And that trend could continue with the potential merger of America and U.S. Airways. And we've seen it recently move into the fee for departure, supplemental, and cargo worlds. I think consolidation will continue in North America and around the globe, and we must be prepared to do our business efficiently and creatively in that environment. Because I believe the airline mergers make for more profitable companies and help us be successful and compete on a global basis. The second change in our industry is that these mergers are creating large carriers. Fewer competitors will likely mean more profits. And when that happens, contract gains are possible. But it also means that politicians and regulators won't tolerate service interruptions and will take steps to remedy the situation. And we've seen this trend rise globally. And I'm sure the U.S. government will have a similar reaction. Now, some of you know Captain Barry Jackson, president of the union representing Qantas pilots. And he can tell you how the Australian government ended concerted activity that amounted to pilots wearing red ties and making respectful announcements to passengers. And the government agency called Fair Work Australia, Fair Work Australia, forced Captain Jackson's union to stop this fearsome activity and then arbitrate the dispute. And just north, Air Canada pilots were prevented from striking, and the parties were ordered to arbitrate their dispute under the Protecting Air Services Act. So we've learned from these examples that profits mean contract gains are possible. But we also have to keep in mind that our traditional ways of negotiating may not lead to more leverage. Instead, it could lead to government intervention and arbitration. My third and final point regarding the change in today's environment is that success on the international level is key to a healthy U.S. airline industry, regardless of the type of flying we do. Which is why we're paying so much attention to airlines in the Gulf and in China. We can't change the way they do business. And so it's time to change the way we do business in North America. As I've said in the past, we must remain loyal to the key precepts of labor relations. First, we know and have proved constructive, stable, and mutually beneficial relationships with management are possible. But that means management must respect our association and share our interests in that kind of relationship. They must deal with our issues, reach equitable agreements, and resolve disputes efficiently. And we commit to do the same. Second, for those managements who don't respect us, who don't want to find solutions or reach agreements, and who want to be our adversary, well, we will demonstrate the same strength and resolve and commitment to our profession as the generations before us. Our ability to evolve will help us succeed. Training ourselves to look for opportunities and explore alternative methods of achieving our goals will get us there. An example, the FedEx and Alaska pilots are using new alternative bargaining models during this round of negotiations similar to what the Delta pilots did. Being creative, efficient, and capturing gains is the hallmark of these approaches. Our companies will only succeed when they realize we are the driving force and linchpins of their success. And our countries and our economies will only flourish if we have a healthy airline industry. We're locked in this together. The stakes are higher than ever. And let me stress something. You shouldn't look at your fellow union members as your competitor. You need to look outside of North America to see how others are trying to take our jobs if we let them. So I'm going to change gears one last time to talk about this new competitive challenge for our carriers, for our governments, and I submit to you, for everyone in this room. Have you been watching how quickly the Gulf carriers are growing? These airlines operate in an environment where there is no financial transparency. They don't pay corporate or income taxes. They operate out of government-owned facilities and airports. They're based in countries where unions are illegal. Therefore, there are no strikes. And human rights violations occur, and the world community looks the other way. I'll highlight one. Emirates operates the largest 777 fleet in the world. And if you haven't heard, they have more than 5,000 pilots. Your colleagues, that because of treatment here in North America, and Emirates willing to pay them to come and compete against other countries, have moved over there. They also have, and in operation, 90 A380s. Do you know how many A380s are on order in the U.S.? 0. 90 A380s cost more than the entire U.S. aviation industry if you wrote a check for it. And as much as I hate to say it, they could write a check for it. And they're flying aircraft fleets that we can only dream of. And at least for now, their fleets are partially purchased with U.S. and EU subsidies, your tax dollars, through the Export-Import Bank and European credit agencies, and then used against you on your routes. And listen, they're expanding rapidly, adding routes into the U.S. at a steady pace. And they have pro-aviation policies backing them from their country. Emirates Chief Executive Officer Tim Clark was recently in the U.S. speaking to a group of aviation leaders, bragging, no, gloating about Dubai's support for their airline industry, calling their government's aviation policy progressive and unrelenting, leading to what he called steady and long-term growth. In their quest for aviation dominance, they will find ways to gain access to our flying through code shares and open skies agreements. Emirates already has a code share with JetBlue, signed one with Alaska, and right now is courting American. And you can expect expansion in the cargo world too. Long-term industry forecasts project the cargo market will expand 5.2% over the next 20 years. And given the long-term vision of Gulf carriers, it's only a matter of time before they become big competitors in your home market. Another factor to consider, these Gulf carriers know that the party who controls Congress and the Parliament will play a pivotal role in gaining access to North American markets. The Supreme Court's 2010 Citizens United ruling allowing foreign companies, nationals, and countries to spend unlimited sums to influence American elections. Combine these code share agreements with political pressure where they can then influence our foreign ownership laws, and you've got trouble. We've got trouble. And that means that they can change the landscape of our industry, our flying, and those doing the flying. Let's not wait. Let's not wait until all of these A380s are sitting in our backyard and say, hey, we need to do something about this. Because by then, it's going to be too late. There is no doubt that globalization has hit the airline industry. But the biggest question is, are we ready for the potential negative impact to our airlines, our routes, and our jobs? And as of today, I'm going to answer that question, no. And unlike our foreign counterparts, our lack of a comprehensive aviation policy actually hinders our ability to achieve economic and competitive viability. So let's be clear. We need aviation policy. We need the Department of Transportation and Canada's Transport Ministry to become ambassadors of airline travel. We need our government to help us in the global marketplace. We need our governments to make our industry a priority. And that priority should include protecting our laws prohibiting foreign ownership and control, protecting our laws prohibiting cabotage, which will once again be before and under attack in the next Congress. We need investments in our national airspace and transportation infrastructure. While NextGen does promise increases in efficiency and capacity, the government has mandated aircraft equipment for government benefit at the airline's expense. So think about it this way. While we're fighting over who's going to pay for NextGen, we've got Asian and Gulf countries investing billions of dollars in aviation infrastructure and equipment. It's the responsibility of our government, our union, and our carriers to level this playing field. ALPA's not going to stand by while our government ignores the unfair competitive advantage of our foreign support structures. We will not stand by while our own government burdens our carriers with unfair taxes and costs. But again, we can't do this alone. Management, labor, and government must recognize our mutual interests and work together. We must define solutions on which we agree and then advance them vigorously. Look, if we don't engage now, we run the risk of losing our careers, our industry, and I submit to you, our profession. That's why I'm asking you, the union leaders of the Airline Pilots Association International, to take the responsibility of setting the priorities of this union very seriously. During our strategic planning sessions this week, we'll discuss how this union should use its resources to address these challenges we're facing during the next 10 years. And as we look to the horizon, I want you to focus on what could be, on how we can and should leave the industry for the next generation. Keep in mind that the world of aviation as we know it is changing, and we need to adapt. It's our responsibility, and I believe an obligation, to ensure our members believe that ALPA does make a positive difference in their lives. What will it take for you to engage? I can't stress how important it is for all of us to find out how everything matters. All right, thank you for your service. Thanks for stepping up and no longer remaining silent. Thanks for your attention this morning during my report. Thank you.